Welcome to Subramani. Those of us who are older, who are maybe in our 50s, 60s, even 70s, we have seen inflation at 18%, right? I have seen inflation at 18%. I have seen inflation at least at 14, 15%, where Reliance would pay 18% on their bonds, right? So those kind of bonds were available. Any bond which is at 18%, which obviously means the inflation has been 14%. However, so people who are younger, maybe in their 40s, or maybe even in their 50s, some people in their 50s may not have seen that, and they may have assumed that interest rates in India have always been benign. In fact, there is also the recency effect that the last 10 years plus we have seen inflation very moderate. I mean, after the UPA 2, which saw inflation of 10, 12, 14%, we came down to a more reasonable thing, because the RBI governor, not a very favorite among the people, Raghuram Rajan, and the Prime Minister Narendra Modi decided to tackle inflation. Why I am saying Narendra Modi is because the RBI governor can just propose that we should target inflation and we should not target growth, right? So something like that has happened, and the government has backed him, right? So the government has kept control of its deficit, etc. So inflation has been in control. Does not mean inflation will always be in control, and I realized this yesterday when I was speaking to a senior citizen. He was close to 87, 88, and he was talking about ATC going away, etc. And I said, uncle, do you really need that extra money? He said you can't appreciate the rate at which the medical costs are going up, and inflation is high. So very difficult to believe, because this man has an index pension. I mean, I think it's a dollar denominated pension, so he does not really have to worry. But he was telling me that the pension is a fixed amount. A very small portion of it is a dollar pension. Apart from that, he's withdrawing from his income. So he's saying, I don't have the investable surplus, which is okay at my age, but then I'm worried that the rate at which I'm dipping into my capital is not something very comfortable for me, right? He's lived till 90, so he's saying the risk is I do not know how long I will live, because once you cross 90, then only the probability of reaching 100 comes into play, right? So he said, I'm worried about inflation. So all of us should worry about inflation, because we have got used to having no inflation for very long periods of time. Even if the target RBI inflation is 4%, and let's say it is actually 6% inflation, 6% means in 12 years your portfolio value will go down by half, right? So assuming it does not keep pace with inflation, and in a retiree portfolio, many parts of the assets don't keep pace with portfolio. If you keep a bank fixed deposit, if you put into ultra short bond fund, any of those things will not keep pace with inflation, which means your equity has to keep pace with inflation and do very well to compensate for the inflation in the value of your portfolio. But more importantly for us, the amount of withdrawal that we are doing, right? So bucket number 1, bucket number 2, bucket number 3, I've done enough videos on this bucket theory. So your bucket number 1 should have an X amount of money, which will be, say, 4-5 years expenses. You also have to provide for inflation. Recently in the US, inflation has been high. In India, inflation has not been too high, but we can't prepare ourselves for a 40-year journey saying, I know what happened in the last 4 years. That is what we do. About 40% of so unfortunately in India, we don't have enough surveys done by people. It's fairly obvious, it's expensive, so I don't do surveys, etc. I may put a voting in Twitter or YouTube, but that is not really a good survey, right? So mostly, most people I know, most people watching this video don't have a pension, right? We don't have an index pension. Those who had an index pension, the numbers are only decreasing, because most most private sector companies have done away with pension. If anything, they buy a unity, and if they think the amount is too small, they put some more money and buy a bigger unity. That's what they do. So planning for inflation largely means asset allocation and seeing how asset allocation works. So asset allocation means you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You have basket 1, basket 2, basket 3. So you load up your basket 3 with a lot of goodies, and then the market goes down, then obviously it will hurt. But you know that you have 5 years expenses in bucket number 1 and 5 years expenses in bucket number 2, so you can relax. You can take a deep breath, do vipassana, whatever you know that over the next 10 years the market will come back 5 times and go down 5 times, whatever, right? So shares are a good bet against inflation. Real estate is of course a good bet against inflation, simply because the shares may not increase the dividend in proportion to increase in share price, but rent will definitely keep going up with inflation and supply and demand, etc., right? So though that will happen, real estate will happen because rent will keep pace with inflation. So in the accumulation phase, when individuals save, right? So if you're in your 30s, 40s and you're saving, and then it is time for you to buy and accumulate and create your portfolio. And the deaccumulation phase or the withdrawal phase, you will withdraw from the retirement fund. So depending on which level where you are, if you are still accumulating money for retirement, good chance that you will have access to good quality advice on how to increase the investment that you have for retirement. But whatever you do, understand that a 2% inflation, if you assume, and it turns out to be 6%, you're going to be completely wrong in the projection that you made. It does not matter whether you are an investor or whether you are a proper, you're an educationist, whatever you are, right? Thank you.